I hate this movie. I mean, it really pissed me off. And don't worry, I'm not going into a screechy rant about how it's the worst thing in the world, blah, blah, no. I wasn't offended by this movie. If I watched it in a theater, I wouldn't walk out on it. No, that distinct honor goes to The Rise of Skywalker. They were just so fucking mean to C-3PO. That said, I should put some bias right up front. I fucking love Mick Ronson and his singer David Bowie. Like many queer people being shown that someone who is assigned male at birth is allowed to wear makeup, sing songs, and be bisexual, of course I was going to latch onto this guy's music like an anglerfish to another anglerfish. Look it up. And like two femme anglerfishes, I clung to David Bowie's music through good times, bad times, funny nervous breakdowns, and serious nervous breakdowns. That was supposed to be funnier. Hearing that a musician's influence is David Bowie is not dissimilar to hearing that a baby boomer-aged musician was inspired by the Beatles. It's kind of a no-duh answer, because of course lots of people are going to like popular music. There's nothing wrong with that. But allow me to offer some reasons that David Bowie was loved, why we are still talking about him after his death in 2016, and why these are the reasons I did not like the film Stardust. No, Neil Gaiman, not your movie. Stardust is a 2020 film starring Johnny Flynn and podcast dad Mark Maron, and directed by Gabriel Range. Now, imagine I've told you to make me a peanut butter jelly sandwich, but I've forbidden you under pain of deportation from using peanut butter and jelly. This is the film you would have, because the David Bowie estate forbade the use of David Bowie's music. And this wasn't just the estate being difficult. David Bowie expressly forbade his life being depicted in fictitious film. So from the start, you have no music, no permission from the people who own the music, and nothing but goodwill from the fans, which isn't going to lead to an unconditional love for the final product. You have to show that you care. So let's talk about the surface level impressions. If a movie isn't plot-driven, you can still make it look good. Sure, Titanic might not be a perfect movie, but for 3 hours you believe you're on a ship in the 1910s. Moulin Rouge has some plot holes and is a little much at times, but there's dancing, people can actually sing, and a very clear effort was made. Sometimes the aesthetics are the difference between a good movie and a boring one. To take a look at the opposite, a movie like My Dinner with Andre, or a play like Waiting for Godot, that's how I'm pronouncing it, don't fight me, take place in a single setting, but it makes up for the simplicity with dialogue. This film doesn't have any of that. When more effort is put into the title cards for the production companies at the beginning, it's not a good sign. The film begins like it's going to work parallel to the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. This seems like a good choice because David Bowie loved that movie and it inspired one of his biggest songs. A song that, if it weren't for a lot of hard work and reinvention, could potentially have been Bowie's only song. I get the impression that this movie is trying to be the same kind of art house flick that 2001 was. And while I have no problem with referencing films in your own, when it's the first thing we see only to switch over to another style, it's just stylistic whiplash. I understand that this film was supposed to look like the 1970s, and while features of style in the 70s were a little drab and boring sometimes, your movie made 50 years later has to use technology and set dressing and styles we have today. Perhaps this was a result of budget restrictions, which can be difficult, and I sympathize, but now we have to talk about the makeup. It looks bad. John Lennon once glibly described glam rock as rock and roll with lipstick on. Fuck you, John Lennon. To this day, people still get in a tizzy over a cisgender man or someone assigned male at birth wearing makeup. Conservative viewpoints aside, people who engage in dramatic makeup looks get criticized for allegedly putting on feminine accoutrement for one reason only. It's attention-getting. Miles Davis once asked, "Bowie, isn't that the guy who dresses like a woman?" This is essentially the impression people had. But it was different from just running around in sloppily thrown-on drag. David Bowie's outfits were intentional, from color to the design to the fact that he got a kimono in the 70s. Weeps weren't a thing then, so getting one of those was not only a bitch and a half, but it shined a light on David Bowie's love for the avant-garde and foreign art forms. He wasn't just grabbing something off the rack at a thrift store and shellacking blush on his face. These were outfits that were made with love. To put it bluntly, the makeup in this film looks bad. Perhaps this is because they couldn't hire a makeup artist who is trained to make people look better on camera, but I can't say for certain. But the viewer doesn't care about that. The viewer just knows it looks bad, and this film isn't helped by the performance. David Bowie had a distinct face. He was androgynous, he had anisocoria, and confidence. Johnny Flynn plays David Bowie as a shrinking violet, who frankly looks like a David Bowie Halloween costume, as opposed to a film about a person who really existed. The most important thing you need in a biopic is recognition. You need to look at the actor and say, that's Johnny Cash, or that's Selena. But I put it to you, in a vacuum, does Johnny Flynn's portrayal contain any resemblance of David Bowie apart from British himbo? Now, let's talk about the biggest hurdle this movie had.
Ho, ho, ho! Didn't you bring me a sundae? How can you share a sundae with Santa if you don't bring a sundae to Santa?
There's a scene in the film where Oberman tells Bowie that for legal reasons he is unable to play any of his songs while in America. As he is not documented to work here, just visit. This mirrors real-life issues that this film had where they had to make a David Bowie movie without his songs. Remember how I asked you to make me a PB&J sandwich with no P, B, or J? That's what this is like. But that's no reason to make a bad movie. In my opinion, there was an underappreciated film a few years ago that had the same problem. It was called All Is By My Side. Filmmakers set out to make a movie about Jimi Hendrix, but were legally barred from using Hendrix music. How did they work around this? They made a film about the time where Jimi Hendrix wasn't a songwriter, but just a guitar virtuoso. It wasn't uncommon in the blues scene at the time to do covers of other musicians as well as old standards, so it was easy to avoid copyright issues. Andre 3000 is not only a talented guitar player, but he even learned to strum his guitar with his left hand. He had Jimmy's mannerisms, his style, his attitude, and there was a sense of his career being at stake, but ended on a note where the audience feels like he grew as a performer. Backbeat had young actors playing the Beatles during their days of playing in German brothels. These would be days where they'd play newly imported Little Richard, Muddy Waters, and tons of black artists that didn't get played in America. We didn't need reminding that these would be the Beatles one day because this was supposed to be their Hamburg days. This movie wants to be more than it's allowed to be. Mark Maron's character is wheeling and dealing and making lofty assertions that this skinny mime named David Jones would one day be David fucking Bowie. He's timid, he's pretentious, all qualities that either need to be justified by him having the ability to exceed expectations, or maybe just not being put in the movie. This isn't just me lambasting the filmmakers. I can't tell you for a fact that the people who made this movie didn't care enough to do a good job, because I truly don't know. But let me summarize by saying this. Rocket Man was perfect because great effort was made. Bohemian Rhapsody had its problems, but I liked that movie and a good effort was made. With Stardust, an attempt was made. And that's the most diplomatic way I can describe it.
Do you know whose face is on that dollar, Kevin? A great man.
David Bowie.
George Washington.